It was a day of jury selection. It was a day of potential gag order violations. And joining me now to discuss all of this, a former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers Association, Neama Rahmani. Neama, great to be with you. Thanks so much for having this conversation with us tonight.
Of course. Thanks for having me, as always, Amrit.
Well, you know so much about this world as a trial attorney and a former federal prosecutor. So people at home want to know about the jury selection. Let's just begin there. Just talk to us about what we can expect and what we saw today.
Well, Amrit, what we typically see is not really jury selection so much as jury deselection. And this is why. The first thing the judge is going to do is ask jurors questions to determine whether they can be fair and impartial. And everyone in this country has a view of Donald Trump. Some people think he's a criminal and an insurrectionist. Other people think he's an American hero who's being railroaded by our criminal justice system. So those jurors are going to be excluded, and the parties are going to be able to exercise their peremptory strikes. Those are strikes that they can use for any reason or no reason at all, as long as they're not constitutionally prohibited, such as being based on race, religion, national origin. And the 12 or so lucky jurors that remain, plus those 6 alternates, they end up being the jurors on the panel.
It's interesting. I mean, there's something like 96 prospective people who came in, and then allegedly half of them were dismissed right away for saying that they couldn't be impartial. And then there's also this survey that they were taking, right? Tell us more about that.
So normally, no one wants to show up for jury duty. You get that summons, you're like, oh. Now, in a case like this, the most politicized trial in American history, even less so. First of all, it's going to drag on for probably a couple months. And then we know that there are members of Trump's base that may try to identify the jurors, even though they're not supposed to be identified, and dox them. And there's just folks that don't want to have anything to do with this. So they raised their hands, more than 50 today, and said, I'm out. And Judge Juan Merchan was pretty accommodating and letting them go. He's trying to move the process along. And those that come and say, you know what, I can be fair and impartial, I can judge this case solely on the facts and evidence in this case, then they start answering those 40-plus questions. Or do you follow Trump on Truth Social? Have you read Michael Cohen or any of Trump's books? And they go down the list. And then there's further questions to determine, are they qualified to sit as a juror in this case?
Interesting. So we're looking at ultimately what will be 12 people on this jury and some alternates, 6 you said, right? And this questionnaire that comes after people make it through their first round, and then there's also these peremptory challenges, which is challenges for no reason, and eventually we do get this 12-member jury. What's a timeline on this? People are saying it's going to take all week. People imagine it will take longer. What do you expect to get a jury?
I would be shocked if we get a jury this week. If we get it done next week, that's pretty quick. Things are moving slowly, not just in terms of the jury selection, but the defense is raising all sorts of motions. We started late today. The defense was renewing their motion to disqualify the judge, to admit certain pieces of evidence, exclude others. So that took most of the morning today. We didn't start till the afternoon. We're obviously taking Wednesdays off as well. So if we're doing half days or not full days, and there's a lot of questions, follow-ups that the jurors are going to have to answer, it's not going to be a case that is going to get a jury impaneled this week, maybe not even next week if we proceed at this pace.
Yeah, as you say, a lot of pretrial motions filed. Defense, it wasn't just defense, though. It was also prosecutors talking about this gag order that Judge Merchan had initially imposed about a month ago, saying, hey, from President Trump, you can't disparage, you can't talk about anyone who might possibly be a witness. And it does appear that Trump former attorney Michael Cohen will be a witness. And this morning, it was Trump taking a Truth Social to disparage Michael Cohen, as he has done in the past. Prosecutors saying this is a violation of your own gag order, Judge. Just take us into the calculus around that and where that stands and what the consequence could and would be for Trump violating this kind of gag order.
You talked about it. You talked about the order, and you talked about consequences. Well, it appears that Trump has repeatedly violated this gag order. And this is something that was a consistent theme in the civil cases that we saw. But we saw that Judge Engoron there in New York, he imposed nominal fines, $5,000, $10,000. That's walking around money for someone like Donald Trump. And today, surprisingly, the prosecution asked for $1,000 fines for each of these violations. Well, what kind of sanction is that for someone like Donald Trump? The question is a judge going to step up and say, listen, if these violations continue, if they're intentional, I'm actually going to enforce this order and hold you in contempt?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there was also some conversation from Rashawn about the Access Hollywood tape, admissibility of evidence. What's the latest you can tell us on why the judge rules that that can't be played, the Access Hollywood tape, but that the jury can see the transcript? I mean, give the people at home a sense of what the distinction is there.
Yeah, he split the baby there, and the judge said, look, this is prejudicial. The probative value is outweighed by that prejudice. Look, at the end of the day, we're talking about an affair with Stormy Daniels, $130,000 that was paid. There's some allegations related to Karen McDougal as well. But really, what does that grab them by the expletive, what does that necessarily have to do with the facts and the evidence in this case? And not a whole lot. So I think the judge got it right with siding with the defense there.
Yeah, what you're talking about, as you mentioned, the probative value versus the prejudicial impact of any evidence. This is all the things that the judge has to think about when it comes to this trial phase, something that you know well, Neama. So if we think about the charges as we see it, it's this hush money payment and alleged falsifying of business records. And it's really these two hush money payments themselves are not illegal. Falsifying business records, of course, comes with its own consequence. You put these two in connection with this larger campaign finance allegation, and then it becomes something. Just talk about the charges, the nature of the charges, and what we're seeing with respect to possible consequences and what kind of case the prosecution is trying to make as a result.
Well, Ahmed, that's an important distinction. We know that having an affair is not unlawful between consenting adults, and paying someone is not unlawful. Obviously, a false business record saying that is a legal payment when it's not, that is unlawful. And Michael Cohen, of course, will be the star witness. He'll testify for the state. He'll say there was no retainer, there was no legal services rendered. But importantly, like you mentioned, that is just a misdemeanor under New York law, really a slap on the wrist. The only way it becomes a felony is if those false business records are in furtherance of or to cover up another crime. If not, they don't rise to the level of a felony. So you have this legal gymnastics here. A lot of folks have been critical. They said, well, how is this covering up another crime? So the district attorney's office is going to come in and say, well, this is an unlawful campaign contribution to Trump's 2016 campaign, or that this was somehow used to help evade taxes. But the state needs to get something, whether it's campaign finance related or tax evasion related, to get this to a felony. Otherwise, even if Trump is convicted, we're just talking about misdemeanors.
And everything you laid out so well there, Neama, is really why what evidence is allowed and what orders are obeyed or disobeyed is so important, because it's all going to be a step-by-step moment. Nothing's a slam dunk when it comes to the legal system. But you understand it so well, and I want to appreciate you for bringing that insight into the show tonight. Thank you so much, Neama Rahmani.
Of course, Amrit. Thanks for having me, as always. See you soon.
Great to have you, and we'll talk to you again soon.